we're good to go. Well, welcome back to the Peter Parker podcast. I'm Parker.
I'm Peter.
And we're here to pump you up. Sorry, that's a bad joke. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but it's all good. We are excited about our fourth podcast, and we're here with Tom Wolverton, and he has been, how long have you been teaching at MIU?
This will be my 15th semester.
15th semester.
This spring.
Long time.
Yeah.
and so you teach in our general education department.
That's correct.
And how many subjects do you teach?
I have 6 different subjects I teach regularly. Each semester 5. And so this coming semester I'll be teaching lectures in philosophy, intro to sociology, marriage and home, global leadership, and studies in religion.
So it's like all encompassing.
Right.
So a lot to talk
Lots
about
of
and everything.
things, yes.
So the good thing is that we're going to be asking him some questions about teaching. Some of you may be wanting to get into education and are figuring out or trying to, like, wondering, where do I start? Where do I begin? What is it like to teach long term? What is some good advice that I could have as from a teacher who's been doing it for a long time? And so we're going to ask a lot of questions. And so really the first question that we want to ask is, how did you get into education?
Well, I started teaching before I came to Mongolia. I got a job for the University of Tennessee, training new state employees that were going to be social workers. I had been doing that work and then was hired as a trainer, and I did that for a number of years, and just loved it. I loved seeing students get it. I love seeing students learn something new and go, I can use this. This will help me. And so in all of my subjects, that's kind of my key thing is trying to teach it in a way that is practical, daily application.
Gotcha. So as far as when we were talking about getting into education, getting into teaching, so how long ago was that when you first?
That would have been in 1999. I started doing that, and I wasn't a teacher all the time since then. I spent several years doing other things, but teaching. I tell my students all the time, you'll probably never have your dream job. Very few people ever get their dream job, but I did.
Yeah.
And so, but I didn't know it was until I got it.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah.
So you've had some experience teaching and everything for these past years. And so I guess a good question to be is, what do you think it takes to become good at teaching or to be a well-rounded teacher?
Right. I think the most important thing is care about your students' learning. That's the biggest thing. It's not just about delivering content. That's important. You have to deliver content. It's not just about giving an exam and grading them. Also important, got to do it. But it's caring that the students actually learn. And there's I can't tell someone how to do that. And it's not a particular behavior. The students just see it. Some other things with that, you have to be humble. You got to be willing to not know the answer to a question. So a student asks a question and you're like, I don't know the answer to that. I love those questions. Many teachers are totally offended by them and paranoid. I'm supposed to know everything. I don't have to know everything. Now, if somebody asks me something I don't know, I'm going to go try to find an answer. Now I want to know. But I think it's having that humility of I don't know everything, and being able to then engage with the students in learning. And so I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. And I think that's an important part to make. You said at the beginning that, to be a good teacher, to become a good teacher, is that you actually care about your students. Because I remember back when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, and even in university, the teachers that I always remembered were, of course, the ones that were really mean. I always remember those teachers. But then I also remember those teachers that actually cared. And sometimes the care was, hey, Parker, you're not doing very good.
Right.
And it's like, ooh, okay. But they'd always help me out. And so I always remember those teachers the best. And so to me, that that was a good teacher. Not just to teach the content,
Right.
but to look at me as a person and say, oh yeah, I care about you more than that.
I think there is a new theory in the education, especially in teaching, that says that if the students don't learn anything, that means the teacher didn't teach.
Right.
And so, what do you think about that?
When I give an exam,
Yeah.
the average grade of the class is my grade.
Okay.
And so if I give an exam and the class average is a C, something went wrong.
Oh.
Right?
Okay. So
I'm not looking for a class average of a C. All right? Because I'm going to test them on what I taught them. Right? And those things that I emphasized, you should know this. Right? If I emphasized it well, and I believe they learned it, they should be in the A-B range. Now, if I was teaching major classes, I think this would be a little different because I'd be asking lots of details that would require that I don't do in the classes I have now. But if I get an average of a C, I didn't engage my students. I wound up with mediocre. I want to engage the students so they're willing to put forth more effort. I also want a high standard, but with lots of encouragement. So one of the things I tell my students all the time is, this is hard, but you can do hard things.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know if I can. How'd you get here? You've done hard things because you got here. You're sitting in this class, I believe in you. And I probably say that 10 or 15 times in every class during a semester. I taught English for a little while. I'm not such a good English teacher. But I did that for a while. But I know learning language is hard. And so one of the things I always, every Friday especially, I'd write it on the board. You can do it, never quit. You can do it, never quit. Because in life, pretty much worldwide now, people, kids say, life is so hard. Old people don't understand how hard life is. Except there aren't many young people in the world even developing countries, that get up every morning going, what am I going to eat today? I have to go find food. But in the past, everybody lived like that. That was hard. Most of us haven't lived in war. That's hard. But no matter how you live, it feels hard. It's the hardest thing you ever did. And so I really try to convince them that life is hard, yes, but it's not that hard. You can do it.
I think that brings me to the point where I feel like with that theory, I feel like there is a big responsibility on the teacher.
Yeah.
Like the whole class, it's just on his shoulder.
Right.
Basically,
Yeah. But we teach university students. I tell them, one of the first things I say in class, how many children are in class? Raise your hand. No, I don't. Even if I've got a 16-year-old, they won't admit to being a child. I'm not a child. Okay, you're all adults. I'm going to treat you like adults.
Yeah.
Adults do their work. They show up on time. Because if you don't, you get fired. So I see myself as preparing them for their adult life. And so I'm not going to treat them like they're in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
And, well, they didn't come, they didn't do all their work, but I hate to give them a bad grade. I don't give grades. I report the grade you earn. So if you get an F, you get an F. Students get Fs in my class every semester. But even those students, I'll tell them, look, I believe in you. You got to retake my class, but I believe in you. You can do this. And they'll be like, okay. And it's like, if you want to meet and go over some study habits, I'll do that too. And that's, I really believe that all of them can do anything they set their mind to. But they don't believe that yet.
Yeah. I think that will bring me to my next question, which is, what about with that big responsibility in hand, what would you say is the hardest thing about being a new teacher, a first-year teacher?
Right.
And what would you advise them?
Right. Being a new teacher, I remember when I first started at NYU, all the classes I was teaching here, I had never taught anywhere else. They generally fit within my background and all of that, but I hadn't taught them before. And so I had new textbooks, no PowerPoints, no papers, no exams made. I had to make all of that. And so I would spend 8 to 10 hours, 5, 6 days a week studying for my 3 to 6 hours of class in the next day. And preparing and building PowerPoints and getting ready for exam. And I didn't sleep a whole lot. And the next year, I went through and refined all that, but I had to read everything again, study everything again. Now I've been teaching most of these classes long enough where I can spend 15 to 20 minutes preparing for one class, reviewing what I've done many times. But when you're new, you've got to put forth the time. But also be willing to not know the answer. Students are going to ask things, and you're going to be like, I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a good question. I'm glad you asked it. I'll try to find out and get an answer.
So what about, if you are a teacher, a professor, and you're asked to teach a subject that is not your background or something that you know very little about? Like, what would you do in that situation? What kind of advice would you give?
I've done that before as well. It's not easy because you are responsible for the content. One of our required classes in Mongolia at all schools is Mongolian history. And we had a year where we didn't have a history teacher, but every student has to take it. So I volunteered and was asked to teach that class one time. I don't have a degree in history. I like history. I've read history. I like historical movies. Teaching history is not the same. And so, again, I spent 10 to 20 hours studying for every one class. So I had that class Wednesday and Friday. I would spend 10 to 20 hours preparing for each one of them. and then it went so much faster than I thought. I learned a lot about Mongolian history. And I don't know that I was a great teacher. I think I met the minimum requirement. My students said it was good, but I had 65 students in that class. And so, the first exam, I think the average grade was a 72.
Wow.
And so we retook that test. We did a whole class on just restudying, reviewing, and then retook the test, and that brought it up some. Because if a class takes a test and on the test they show we didn't learn what you taught us, I need to teach it again. At least the key points. And so I did that, and then on the final, the average grade was a good mid B. But I taught a little differently. I prepared them for the exam a little differently. Prepared the exam a little differently. It's not just about making it easy so they can get a good grade. I don't want to do that. I still want it to be hard. But hard just means you have to study. What most students call hard isn't hard. It's not like figuring out how to do advanced calculus if you're not good at math. That's hard. Or writing a 12-page essay on something you know nothing about in a week. That's hard. But doing your work during the semester, studying, reading, doing your homework, you do all of that, exams are easy.
I think a lot of it comes down to just time management.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned time management very quickly when I got to university after I got my first D. I was like, I didn't do well. But you have that freedom, right? And so you're going hang out with friends and everything like that. But it really was the teachers who cared about me and said, hey, I know you're better than this, right? And so they wanted to help me out and pursue me to be a better student. So
I think I have there is two approaches to this about material developing. So teacher as material developer. So what do you think on this point, since it's about teaching? And so do you think it is better for the teacher to develop his or her own materials or use the materials they're already prepared?
Right. Well, it depends. I think there's different levels of that. The vast majority of classes you're going to take in your life. In university, most of the classes I teach, I use a textbook that somebody else wrote. And so I'm using their materials. But I take from that textbook and build my power. These are the points that I really want to emphasize. Also, in my introduction to sociology class, it's a 600-page textbook. And it's a textbook. I use a PDF, so the students don't have to buy it or anything. But if it was printed, it'd be this thick, and it'd be, it's a giant book, lots of words on the page. So the first time I read that book, I highlighted everything I wanted my students to read and said, you don't have to read the rest. You can read the rest, but if you have to read all of this, it's going to take you forever.
Yeah.
And I give a quiz almost every class over the textbook reading that we haven't talked about yet. So you have to look at the textbook to pass the quiz, which is 25% of your grade. And because what I've learned, they talk about different learning styles, which were really the emphasized a lot in teacher training. But now there's new research coming out going, nah, not really. There's not really, people can learn many different styles. Everybody can. And so, but I try to have, you got the PowerPoint to see it, you got me talking that's doing that, plus you have to read your book. Plus we're an international campus. So we have lots of teachers with different accents, teachers like me that talk too fast a lot of the time. and students are like, what'd he say? What'd he say? Did you hear that? No, I didn't hear it. I don't know what he said. and so that happens. But what I try to get my students to do, and I tell them to do this in all their classes, read the book before you go to class. And then when the teacher says something and you're like, what do you say? Oh, yeah, it's that word, that new word.
It's already in your head.
It's already in your head. And you're just so far ahead because most students don't read. You tell a student to read and it's like, I don't read. And it's like, and you can't, if you really want to be successful in life, you have to read. And so, I emphasize that. And my main thing, general education, the things I'm teaching, students don't have to know those things to do their career, whatever job they're doing. It's not a technical skill.
Right.
So everything I'm teaching, I try to build it around learning to think. These are frameworks and ideas that help you think about life, that help you solve problems, that help you consider why are other people being like they're being? What's going on there? And so that's what I really try to focus on in my classes is teach them how to think.
I would say which will carry over into every other aspect of learning, and then also carries over into your job as well. Learning how to think is just half the battle. So I think that's why, in schools and universities, because I've had this conversation, why do we have elective classes? Why do we have that? For that very purpose. Because we want you to be a well-rounded student, a well-rounded person who can be productive in society. And so you need to learn to think and to think concretely but abstractly, and how to interact with people. And so there's human communication, all that. So
I asked a student, I think he got all the GPA 4 this time, and really good. And so I said, what's the difference? What is different this time? And he said before he used to memorize things, his major subjects especially. But this time he tried to understand the content. And he said he didn't memorize anything this time. He just tried to understand everything, the class and the textbook and all that. And he said that changed a lot. I generally don't require my students to memorize anything. In fact, the way I ask questions is often different than it was said in class. Same question, worded differently. You have to understand it to be able to answer it. I remember in India, I think one time, because of the Indian system, I think there's a lot of memorization. And so I remember my friend, it's a 20-point question. And we had to memorize it. It was 5 pages or something. He had to memorize everything. I think it was a philosophy subject. And so I helped him, and he memorized everything. He spent, a week or so to memorize that answer. And then he went for the exam, and he came back, and he's like, no, I couldn't do it today. I think the question didn't come. And I look at his question paper, and actually, it was just a few words were just changed, switched, synonyms. Synonyms, and then you just couldn't understand anymore. And you missed the whole thing, and I'm like, whoa. So I realized from that time, if I'm going to help my friends, I'm going to help them understand the content, like the question and everything else. And so I think,
memorizing isn't all bad. Certain facts need to be memorized. You can't learn a language without learning vocabulary.
Exactly.
But terminology. But learning vocabulary in a story is much better than memorizing a list. Right. And so the same thing. We try to get them to learn facts, but in the story, in the story of the content that we're presenting.
Yeah.
And so that's how you get that. Now, there are certain things, if you're taking a math class and there's 12 formulas that you may have to memorize those because you can't apply them without knowing them, without having that here. I think primary school should be a lot about memorizing your basic things. You're learning vocabulary, you're learning addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, all of that. By the time you get to university, you're applying all the things you memorized.
Yeah.
Though in some major classes, there's still lists of facts that you need to know in order to think and apply.
Yeah.
That's going to still come up.
Yeah, totally agree. What about students? How do we help as teachers? How do we teach to students with many anxieties and other struggles?
Right. Lots of students with anxiety. A lot of people have test anxiety, but there's a lot of anxiety in life. And I talk about that a lot in my classes just because of the nature of them. And I say a lot of it is the way that we use social media. I don't blame it on social media. It's the way we use it. We post a picture of ourselves and we tell the world, look at me. Look at me. Do you like me? and we might get 50 likes, or you do a selfie, and especially the young ladies, they do a selfie, and all their friends say, beautiful, lovely, you're so wonderful. One person says, what about that zit on your chin? And all the beautifuls just disappeared.
That's the only one
The
you hear.
one person got all the power.
Yeah.
And it's like, my face is so ugly. No, you're not. But then we apply that to all of life. You take an exam, and maybe you thought you were going to make an A or a B, and you made a C. You didn't prepare correctly for the exam. That happens. You prepared, but not correctly. And you just think, I'm an idiot. I'm a loser. Not true. You didn't prepare correctly. Do it better the next time. And so that's the thing I try to tell them. You are never a failure, though sometimes you fail. And so study people who are great successes in the world. Go back to when they were young. They failed many times. Why are they successes and most people aren't? Because when they failed, they got up and tried again. Most people fail and they quit. They just get a job somewhere.
So kind of flipping it, helping students out. But then also teachers. I mean, teachers have bad days too.
Oh, yeah.
They come in and they have rough days and everything like that. So, on those bad days when it's just, maybe it's life is getting to them, or maybe family issues, whatever like that, and they still have to come and do their job and teach and, do all those things. What kind of advice would you give those teachers?
I think it's kind of like an athlete. If you ever watch, high-level sports, professional sports, Olympic sports, those athletes don't get to have a bad day. If they're sick, they're expected to perform top level. If they have somebody they love dies, they don't get the day off. They still have to perform. They're being paid millions of dollars in many cases. We're not. But our students, we are there for them. And so it is on us to put our game face on, to come into class and say, we can talking to ourselves, I don't feel like doing this today. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to do anything. But there's a group of people who need me to stand up for them, to be here for them. And if it's, if you aren't going to be your normal self, you can just tell them, I've had a bad day. And I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to give you the best I can do today. And be honest. You don't have to be completely transparent. You don't have to share your whole personal life. But the other thing is, I think we can just set that aside. In the next hour and a half, I'm here for my students. And take care of that. The hardest thing is when you have a class. I get really frustrated when students aren't coming to class, when I can't engage the students. That's me. If I see a bunch of students, if I see 2 or 3 students go to sleep, they're tired. And usually I'm just let them sleep, mark them absent. And they're like, I didn't have any absences. What are you doing? And it's like, sleeping on your desk is not present. It's not body that I want. It's eyes and brain that I want here. And so I just mark them absent. But if I see a third of the class falling asleep, I'm boring. and so that's when I've got to step it up.
Yeah.
You know, I've got to get a little more animated, a little more interesting, tell a story, do something, grab their attention.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's the last year and a half has been a really bad day. Doing classes on Zoom.
On Zoom, yeah.
I've got 60 students in the class. I can see 3 faces.
Oh man.
And you know, it's like
I know.
I'm talking to my computer. It's so hard to not be boring.
Yeah.
And then now we've got them in the class last semester, but everybody's wearing a mask. It's about the same as Zoom.
We can't see. You can't see their expression.
We can't see any expression. I don't know if they're engaged or if they're understanding. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so, because I watch my students' faces, I'm always looking around the room. And if I explain something and everybody's kind of like, what? It's like, I gotta say that again. And I gotta rephrase it. If I look and everybody's going, okay, move on. They got it. Keep going.
Yeah.
And that's, but you've got to be connected to your students. You've got to be looking them in the eye, seeing each one to do that.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like, I don't know if it seems like some students expect us to entertain them in the class sometimes, up to the point where, like, unless the teachers do something, they will not pay attention. And I don't know, what do you think, like, has the students' attitude towards learning changed, like, in the course of time? Like, before, they just come there, learn, they will sit and learn their best, but now it looks like teachers need to do a lot more for them to learn. Potentially.
But I think it's always been the case. If you're boring, you're boring. Even a student who cares can't stay awake with a boring teacher.
Yeah.
I took a history class once that should have been a very good class, because history is dramatic. You don't make the history book unless you did something really wrong or really good, and there's story there. But most history classes are kind of boring. The teacher kind of goes, right. And I had one history teacher that stood behind this podium and he was kind of a short guy, so you can only see his head above the podium. And he went, I could not stay awake in that class. The next semester I had a different history teacher. And she would come into class. She didn't use any notes when she was teaching, except she wrote on the chalkboard. It was chalkboard days. Usually a 16-point outline, leaving space to write between every point, because the whole front was chalkboard. And as long as you wrote down whatever she wrote down and studied that for the test, you were good. But you could have not written down anything and done well, because she told the story of the history like she cared, like it was interesting. And I loved that class. And I don't think anybody didn't love that class. I had a writing teacher that was the same way. Who enjoys an academic writing class? Don't commit plagiarism. You do your citation. Come on, you're killing me here. But she would bounce while she taught. I've been trying to recruit her to come here.
It's so true, because it's like, going back to those teachers that cared, but also as the teachers who were engaged to what they were teaching. So the same thing, I had a history teacher who would literally, if there was a battle, he would enact it out, and then and then he would involve us, and he'd be yelling, and sometimes other teachers would be like, okay, you got to be quiet a little bit, because he's so loud, but it was so engaging, it was a lot of fun. But it's like, I didn't have to take notes. We did because we were required to, but it's like I didn't have to.
There are key facts. You might not remember the date, or the particular name exactly, but somebody did this then, along there. But then you got to get the details. But I think that's the key, is whatever you're teaching, care about it. Like our class that Jim Box and I teach, Marriage and Home, doesn't have a textbook. We have gathered this information. It's just a relationship class, how to have a healthy relationship. But we've gathered it from probably 30 or 40 different books and teachers and things. And we keep saying we should write that down, because nobody writes a book totally out of their head. It always comes from many sources. And so we've been saying for 5 years we're going to write the book, but we haven't done it yet. but saying, we want young people to be able to have a healthy relationship. And so we started offering that class. And typically we've got 60 students every semester taking that class. And we split that into 2 groups because we want to be able to focus that one. But yeah, it's about, teaching your students so they can use what you teach them. Not just giving, not just, you need this grade so you can get this diploma so you can get a job. Yeah. Life is not fun that way.
So I think we have time for maybe one more question.
All right.
And so we're this is just opinion, of course, but
I always have an opinion.
in your opinion, what has been or what is the best part of teaching?
Being with students. I mean, I'm getting older, but hanging around with people that are between 17 and 22 years old, I have to stay kind of young. So I love that. And then seeing the light come on, teaching something and seeing that face that says, I don't get it. Okay, let me explain it again. And then then you say the next thing, and everybody goes, "Oh, I got it."
That just satisfying.
Winner.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And so that's what I'm looking for all the time, is those winning moments with the students.
That's good. Well, I think that's about it for all that we have today. I think it was very informative, very good. We hope that the teachers who are, or the students who are wanting to go into teaching, learned a lot from this, and I'm sure Tom would be more than happy to talk.
Anytime.
If you ever want to come in his office, talk to him about that, get some more advice. Always full of wisdom, and so it'd be good. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
and we look forward to the next podcast too.
Yeah, the next podcast.
Whenever that will be, soon.
Yeah, very soon. And I think we have so many interesting topics this time. With the new year, we have some new interesting topics. And so, looking forward to it.
All right. Well, I'm Peter. I'm not Peter. I'm Parker.
And I'm Peter.
This is the Peter Parker Podcast, and we'll see you next time.